I get really excited about companies that have a deep understanding of who their user is and the problem their user has and why their solution is this hair on fire solution that like the customer's going to almost force the product to exist.
Welcome to Founded and Funded. I'm Coral Garnick-Duckin, digital editor here at Madrona. And today I've got the pleasure of interviewing Madrona Investor Maria Gilfoyle for the latest in our Investor Spotlight mini-series. Welcome, Maria.
Thanks for having me, Coral. I'm excited to be here.
So these Investor Spotlight discussions are all about diving into what drives our investors and what they look for in founders. But first, I'll give a little bit of background on you. You learned to code in high school, but you actually wanted to become an artist. And then in college, you started your own company, which later turned into a blog, The Power Thread. And then you worked in a variety of operating roles at Gap Inc. That's such a unique background to end up landing in venture capital. But there is one thread that seems to really kind of bring that all together, and that's having a design-first mindset to everything that you set out to tackle. How did that approach take hold throughout your early experiences and career, and how do you apply it to investing?
I think my approach to investing and how I ended up in venture capital comes back to who I was from a pretty young age. So I grew up going to a very math and science-based day school and high school where everyone was taking advanced math classes and we all had to learn how to code in high school. But I was always a very creative kid. I loved the art table in preschool. I was taking extra art classes outside of school throughout high school. And when it came time to go to college, I really wanted to go to art school and be an artist. And my parents encouraged me to go somewhere that I could study art, but I could also study business and take calculus and other types of math and science courses. And so I went to Washington University in St. Louis, where I started off as a fine art and design major. And the art curriculum there takes a very design thinking approach where there's a large emphasis in the graphic design curriculum on who the end user is, how to communicate the product to them. And so that later evolved after doing some design internships throughout college. I realized what I love about making art had actually shifted into the act of just creating something completely new in the world that can create an impact for people, an impact for companies, and an impact for the end user. And so I became very interested and excited about the entrepreneurship courses on campus and became pretty involved in the entrepreneurship program in the business school, which resulted in starting a small business in college and then led me to creating a blog. This blog actually started off as a way of like testing products and talking to people about different products they liked. Eventually, we started featuring more startups and more venture-backed startups. And when it actually came time for me to graduate college, I found it really exciting to be able to meet so many people and be able to learn about their stories and use it as a way to discover the world. So I went into the rotational management program at Gap Inc., where I was able to learn about a range of different types of businesses. And at Gap, there was a huge focus on designing and creating products with the user in mind. So creating the best product for the user and then meeting the user where they are. And back in the day, 50 years ago when Gap was created, that was a retail store in the neighborhood that the target customer lives. And today that's e-commerce, it's mobile, it's potentially a VR headset, a video game. There's all different places we can meet users. But so I've taken with me my entire life. I've loved creating art, which has kind of led me to this love for innovation and love for technology. And my definition of creating art has really shifted from creating a painting or drawing in a classroom to figure skating routine in high school as I was a competitive skater to a product at Gap and now a software or technology product that fundamentally changes a user's experience and creates a better experience for the company or end user buying the piece of software. And so I love that process of asking, why does this problem exist today? How can it be fixed? And fixing it with technology that's groundbreaking and can change the world.
I feel like your parents must have been super excited because the classic, like, oh, my child wants to be an artist. How do I get them to go to business school instead? Is just, something you see portrayed in movies every day, basically. And you're the success story of, okay, this artist that now is in venture capital. Like, they must be pretty happy.
I think they are, but I did take a roundabout path, and I think it actually has helped a lot as an investor.
So, in terms of your investing framework, you like to apply a user focused approach to every investment. Walk us through how you look at that. I imagine part of how you look at companies comes from your time at Gap Inc.
The two things I learned at Gap that I take with me as an investor today are You have to meet your user where they are, and you have to provide the best product for your user. I always think about every investment decision from who is the user and why do they want this, whether it is at the infrastructure layer or more at the application layer or for the end consumer. I think there's always someone that's ultimately the buyer that has a huge problem that needs to be solved. A company like Runway ML, which I've really enjoyed being able to work on our investment in Runway and partner with them. They're building an application for video editors, video creators, production studios, and they have this deep empathy with designers and understanding how designers think and providing tools for them that help them create their work without taking away the parts of the production and the creativity and the uniqueness of design that makes the artist who they are. I get really excited about companies that have a deep understanding of who their user is and the problem their user has and why their solution is this hair on fire solution that like the customer's going to almost force the product to exist.
So you mentioned Runway ML. You also work with companies like Troop Travel and Rec Room, Clerk. It seems like you kind of do a little bit of everything in terms of industry focus. So when you're evaluating new companies, what gets you excited? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I do cover a range of verticals and that's partially because it really comes back to the end user and also different types of go-to-market strategies. So, Clerk, for example, is a company that's building authentication and user management for front-end developers. It's more the infrastructure layer, but what's really interesting about this company is they're selling into front-end developers that didn't previously have a strong solution for authentication and user management for their applications. And so they've also had to create kind of a viral go to market strategy and creating awareness among individuals that are front end developers. And that's been through often partnerships with YouTubers. There's these YouTubers that are developer influencers. Something I've enjoyed while working at Madrona and working with companies in a range of different spaces is working with them on their go to market strategy. And there's actually a lot of similarities, regardless of the space, of how a company reaches its users and creates value for its users. And that can often be through like different types of social and brand messaging and storytelling and customer research and understanding that end user of the product. And so that could be applied to a company like Trip that's in the travel space, or it can be applied to Clerk, which is a developer tool, or a company like Runway ML, which is focusing on creatives.
So, wrapping up here, I have just a couple of quick hit questions for you. The first one is, do you have one or two must read books that you recommend for founders you're working with?
Yes, I have 2 books I recommend founders read, and one is a book I find myself mentioning in first or second meetings with very early stage founders or future founders frequently. It's a book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. This book talks about how if you have a company idea and you tell your mom, she's probably gonna be like, "Oh, great idea. I love it. You should go build it." And so you may not actually know if it's a good idea. And so when we ask if I have a company idea or someone has a company idea and they go around to their friends and say, "Hey, I have this idea. Let me tell you about it." You say tell them about it and then you say, "So do you think it's a good idea?" You're kind of in this point of actually being vulnerable as the person sharing the idea. And so it can be very hard for that other person, maybe not as hard for an investor, but it can be hard for the everyday person or friend to say, "No, that's a terrible idea, Maria or Coral. You should never go do that."
Right. Nobody wants to shoot down that dream, right?
Exactly, no one wants to shoot down the dream, so they'll probably be like, "Oh, yeah, that's a great idea," and maybe they'll ask a question, maybe they'll say one thing that's slightly negative, but you'll go away probably feeling pretty positive about the idea and good to go build it. And so what the mom test talks about, it's a very short book, it's like 80 pages, but it talks about how to ask questions when you're doing really early stage customer research and user research before you even build a product or build a company, but how to ask questions in a way that you really understand, is this a problem to solve and is this the right user and are you solving it the right way? So you don't get answers like the way your mom may answer the question. The other book is Essentialism, and this is a book about how to prioritize in your life. I read this book about a year ago and it talks about how people should say no more often and kind of prioritize the things that are nines and tens in your life and how that can lead to more long-term success and more organization and happiness. And so it's something I try to think about daily as an investor and also for a lot of founders who are having to constantly think about what should be prioritized and probably feeling spread pretty thin. It's a good framework for how to think about time management.
Okay, so the last question is, what's your favorite thing to do when you're not working, you're not at board meetings, you're not helping founders? I mean, you got a pretty busy schedule. So how do you unwind?
Yeah, so I love exercising. I know that doesn't sound relaxing per se, but I find it relaxing. I feel horrible throughout the day if I don't exercise first thing. So you can often find me on a run or at a workout class like Barry's or Soul Cycle before work. I love going on hikes. That's something I've really enjoyed about living in the Pacific Northwest. I had always lived in cities. And so living in Seattle, it's a total new experience for me. And so I feel like every day there's something new to try here, like going to Portland and to Vancouver. I love living on the West Coast now. It's been a really fun experience, and I think it's home now.
Okay, Maria, it's been great to get to know you a little better. And I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Investor Spotlight episode of Founded and Funded.
Thank you, Coral. I've enjoyed being here and am excited for everything else we continue to do.